welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jet and we are in the Meno. We are exploring what the excellence of the soul is and whether or not it can be taught. Now, in particular, we're looking at whether or not it can be taught to somebody who thinks they already know. And they have a support network. They have a teacher that they maybe spend a lot of money and time on. They have a family and a partner and a society that all supports the idea that he knows he knows that thing that he's talking about. He knows what it means to have the virtue of the soul. He knows what excellence is. No need to ask Socrates about it. We're just wondering whether or not it can be taught. So we are wondering whether it can be taught to somebody who thinks they know. So, we're also learning because we have an awareness that we need to read with a focus on the dialectic. How do we master this art of the dialectic? So we're also learning about how to approach such a person ourselves. And how do we approach our own souls? Because as we know from our reading in the Philosophical Midwifery playlist that we have on YouTube here, we ourselves have a part of us that thinks it knows. So the part of our soul that thinks we know things to do with the soul, to do with excellence, to do with what's good. How do we relate to that part of our own souls? That's the most important thing. So we could see the characters within this text as aspects of our own soul. So interesting. So let's jump in and start to read. So here's where we were last time. We've already seen a kind of dialectic based on the definition of virtue as one of the ideas in being. We've seen a dialectic based on how it demonstrates itself, managing well. And what is managing well? Something that will allow you to reach what is good. So we know some more about the function of the virtues. What's the purpose of the virtues? Is to reach the good. Wow. That was hidden. We had to do some work to see that, which is cool. So reaching the good. So we should have another question. What the heck is the good? What is the good? Well, the conclusion of that second dialectic, managing well to reach the good, using temperance and justice. We concluded the fourth step, the conclusion step. We concluded that it was not just managing well, but managing the self well. Virtue is managing the self well to reach the good. And specifically, justly and never unjustly. So 2 more new questions for us. What the heck does it mean to manage justly? And how do we manage unjustly so that we can always avoid it? Because that managing the self justly and never unjustly is essential for us reaching the good. Third kind of dialectic is a dialectic on division, but it seems to be a little bit different. As it's on division, that's our hypothesis. We're assuming he's following the structure of the dialectic. He is doing divisions. He is giving examples of other sorts of things. So what's Meno's problem? He can't give a definition yet. He can only point to what he thinks are examples. Now, a common problem. Most people in our world will probably only point to examples of what justice is, or what excellence is, or what virtue is. Because they lack a definition, they lack a principle. This lack of principles is why most politicians or people who are in the public sphere with a reputation for being wise and therefore get to have a religion, get to have an evangelist church, get to be a politician, get to be a billionaire. They can't, they want to avoid conversations because they don't know how to define it, because they lack a definition. They only point to examples. What's excellence? This guy that I like, this politician that I like, that kind of thing. So divisions, we're getting examples. The examples we looked at, color and shape. Color and shape. Is one a definition of color or an example? Sorry, is white a definition of color or a color? So here we go back to our fundamental question. Difference between what philosophy really is and the way it's presented or taught in our modern culture, and from what it seems, even back in Socrates' time. In other words, we haven't learned from what Socrates was telling us. Isn't that interesting? We're not learning from such people as Socrates. We aren't learning from our mistakes. And what's the issue? What's the same issue? The difference between a and the. After Socrates, this was dropped because the Latin Roman Empire took over, burnt down the libraries, murdered the philosophers, shut down the academy, and replaced the Greek tradition with a Latin tradition, which didn't have the word the. Isn't that interesting? So you could only talk about a example of something. A apple, not the apple. An apple. Same issue here. He's only able to point to examples, not the thing itself. Not the virtue, but a virtue. Isn't that interesting? So is white a color? Is round a shape? Or is it the color? Is it the shape? Now, Meno doesn't really know how to answer the question, and Socrates says, of course you don't. But let me, then there was a bit of a bargain, about some bargaining. All right, can you answer what exactly is shape? And Socrates said, okay, I'll do that if you do I'll do the lesser if you do the greater. What's that called? Analogy. Analogy is a lesser is to the greater. We look at something we can see in the lesser and we apply it to the greater. That's also called anagogic movement, upward moving. We are developing, we're learning about what's more important. And you can say that's philosophy. Philosophy is nothing other than anagogic movement, upward movement from the lesser. We all start as human beings seeing through their physical senses, but we have to ask questions about the thus. We see physical examples through our physical senses in the physical world that we call the world of becoming, and hopefully we are puzzled. We get stung by a question. What the heck is the cause of these particular things? The many beautiful things, what's this one thing we call beauty? Many good things, everyone does what they think is good. Well, what is the good? Every parent or authority figure or teacher thinks they know what's good, but they don't. What the heck is the good? Not an example. So the upward movement from the physical world, the lesser, to its model or the greater, the world of being. So this is what's happening here. Socrates says, I'll give you the lesser if you promise to do the greater. Interesting. So he's more interested in helping Meno than flexing his muscles, acting like a Noah. Very different from, well, the people who claim to be philosophers nowadays. They're much more interested in flexing their opinions, winning the debate, being seen as a wise person. Socrates is the opposite. Meno said, what, you're not going to tell me what virtue is? Well, I'm going to say that you don't know anything to everybody back home. He said, I don't care. Go ahead. I'd rather be curious, in need of knowing, and go in a dialogue with you to discover. So very different, right? The same sort of issues we see today. Isn't it interesting? Now, again, lesser to the greater. If we see that in the everyday world, lesser, can we make that anagogic movement up to the greater? What's the greater? What's the greater from the everyday world? Our soul. Is there a part of you that is drawn towards acting like you know, playing the knower, flexing when you think you know something? Is there another part of you that's more like Socrates? Wants to know, is okay with not knowing, doesn't care what people think about you, would just rather be open and curious and discuss and learn. And maybe even if you've already learned it, learn it again. So that's anagogic movement. Okay, so Socrates is saying, okay, how do we do it? We use the word same and all, so key terms. What's the same that applies to the all? Now, it's in blue. That's because if you are familiar with the Parmenides, you know that these are archetypal ideas. These concepts, same, different, like, unlike, one, many. These are foundational. These are the most fundamental building blocks of language, building blocks of thought, and building blocks of thought and building blocks of reality. In fact, understanding, well, wondering about which comes first, same and different, one and many, infinite and finite. That's pretty much the puzzles that we have when we get into metaphysics. Anyway, he uses them. He has not just an understanding of the importance of something like same, he uses it. He flat out comes out and says, hey, what is the same that applies to all? Now, can we see a dialectic within that sentence? Let's keep reading. What is the same that applies to all? If that's the definition, is there a demonstration? To the round, to the straight, and those other aspects. Definition and demonstration is the structure of the dialectic within each sentence as well. Does it go all the way through? Interesting. Maybe. Try to answer in order that you may have some practice for your answer about virtue or excellence. You go ahead, Socrates. Socrates says, I'll do it as a favor. And Meno says, okay. So long as you tell me about virtue, right? Meno says, okay, I will. Now then, one must be willing, for it is worth our effort. Okay. Now, let's see if we can use our structure. Starts off, shape is the only one of the truly existing beings that happens to follow color. Is that a definition? Does that suffice? Are you happy with the definition? For if you were, then that would be sufficient for you to speak about excellence in the same way, and I'd be pleased. Meno says no. That's a simple-minded answer, Socrates. What do you mean? Well, because shape is in some way, according to your logos, that which follows color. But what if someone doesn't know what color is? Wouldn't be much of a definition then, would it? Socrates says, hang on a second. He said, oh, by the way, what do you think? If somebody said that about, I don't even know what color is, how would you answer? And Socrates said, I use the truth. So does Socrates know the truth? What does that mean? And if Socrates knows the truth, is knowing the truth unrelated to virtue? Because he says he doesn't know what virtue is. Can you know the truth but not know virtue? So we're getting some more puzzles here. Maybe this is the Sherlock Holmes part of the reading. If he says he knows the truth, but earlier he says he doesn't know virtue, does that mean truth is knowable but virtue isn't? Or that they're known in different ways? Or that they're not the same thing? Take these clues and carry them. If the questioner were indeed one of the wise ones of the heuristic antagonistic kind. Okay, so here we see him use the term wise in a derogatory sense, a sarcastic. Those wise people, the people who claim that they're wise, but really they are heuristic and antagonistic. Debaters, fighters, lovers of contention, haters. They think that's what makes them wise. They're good at debating. Most YouTube channels that claim to be experts on whatever, philosophers or new life coaches or alpha, whatever, or all the right-wing grifting channels. There's lots of them. They're really smug because they think by being good at debating, shooting people down, that makes them wise. It's a new coffee mug. I'm afraid of burning myself. Not too bad. I would say to him that my answer has been stated, but if I did not say it correctly, it's your job to take up the logos and refute me. So if I was in a conversation with these kind of bad actors, these debaters and these sophists, these lovers of opinion who call themselves philosophers, then I'd say, hey, you can't just reject what I say. It's your job to point out what part misses the mark. You can't just say, well, I disagree. No. It's your job to say, take up the logos. Use the logos. Use reasoning to point out where we're missing the mark. But if we were friends and we chose to be dialecticing with each other, here we go, just as you and I are doing now, then I must reply in a more gentle way. So interesting. Depending on who we're talking to, we might use the dialectic differently. Some people are not interested in truth. They are these jerks, heuristic, antagonistic people. Some people may be more like Meno and are more open and curious, perhaps. Or maybe Socrates is outlining two possible ways of being. Hey, Meno, you want to be these kinds of jerks? Maybe that was your school. Debate bros, modern academic situations, or right-wing grifters that claim to be philosophers. But they are heuristic and antagonistic. You have a choice, Meno. Be like those people, and that might be what your tradition is. And again, this isn't a blame game. If this is your tradition, if this is all you know, because how many Socrates people are there out there? One. How many people like that? Everyone else. So it's not blaming him. It's saying, hey, these are the two kinds of people you can be. Debate bros, antagonistic, haters, think you're clever because you just shut down the logos. We got into that in the Phaedo as well, didn't we? Or you could be this other kind of person. Friendly, genuine, and in which case we would relate to each other in a more friendly and gentle way. So it could be inviting him, hey, which game would you like to play? Which sort of person do you want to be? We might say, which life are you about? Are you all about this life? Are you all about that life? Which way do you play? Okay, and what's the gentle way? The way of the dialectician. This is what we're after. We're after the way of the dialectician. So also we're learning philosophy, or what we're learning here, which may or may not be virtue, by the way, keeping that open. Be cool if it turned out that what we're also learning happens to be virtue. That'd be rad. This way of the dialectician is not to like win debates with those kinds of people, the antagonistic people. It's the way of the dialectician are for people who are friends. It's a gentle way of proceeding. And it's different than the formal rules. Hey, you can't just say I disagree. You have to make the case. Here, if someone disagrees, you might like be more friendly and pull it out of them, kind of like Socrates is pulling it out of Meno, who doesn't really know how to talk or how to reason, or what did he say? I don't know how to I should have highlighted it. Carry out the search. Yeah. I'm unable to find this way that you carry out the search, that you can grasp one thing that applies to all. And Socrates says, yeah, of course you don't. Reasonably indeed. So, interesting. Now, those who are following along with Mindy Mandel's channel, all about Platonism, at the time of the recording, we were in book 7 of the Republic, and Socrates makes this case as well. He said, hey, when people first learn philosophy, they get a taste of the logos, then they want to go run around and debate everyone, and they just use it to shut down arguments and shut down people. And Socrates calls that a love of contention. Philonikos. And we're going to make the case, okay, in our education of people, we'll hold back from the learning of the dialectic until they've reached a certain level of maturity and they realize it's not for that. It's not to shoot everyone down and be a big fat smelly jerk to people. It's specifically for talking in a gentle way with your friends in genuine pursuit of the truth. He talks about it's like a kid getting a new toy, or a dog getting a new toy and chewing it. So, offering the two choices for Meno, is that part of virtue? Okay, so if we were friends, we'd go in a more gentle way, the way of the dialectician. Thus, the more dialectical way is not only to answer the truth. So the dialectic answers the truth. That's interesting. Take a note. But equally, to also proceed by means of those premises which one who is questioning acknowledges they know. All right? You have to build on something. You need premises. Last time we looked at basic premises and axioms that's needed to do geometry if you're doing Euclid's geometry. But here, if you actually know what color is, this saying, well, what if I don't know? Is playing dumb kind of thing. Or being devil's advocate, some people call it. That's not the game. You got to have integrity. You've got to be honest. Answer, you got to use those premises that if you acknowledge you know what a color is, then you got to use that. You can't, well, what if I don't know? Or some people say this, like these sorts of techniques that are used in mainstream propaganda and stuff. Some people are saying X, Y, and Z. And hang on a second, that's a lie. You don't think that. Oh, no. But I get to say it on the news because I'm saying some people. All right, we're not lying like is for some bizarre reason allowed on media and in news. It's amazing that that we don't yet have a law that you shouldn't knowingly lie on television, especially on news networks, because people can be manipulated to act against their own interests. Anyway, at the time of recording, we do not yet have that law. Hopefully soon. Because the truth benefits everyone. especially when approached in the friendly dialectical way, seeking understanding. Okay, yes, and that's one of the ways of going. Using the premises that you acknowledge you know. Surely in this way, I shall endeavor to converse with you. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I will define a limit or an extremity back into Euclid. Now, I'm guessing that Meno probably knows about Euclid as well, probably part of his education. Now, there might be someone like Prodicus, who maybe is more of a, I don't know what he's like, but maybe he's one of those teachers who wants to get it word for word. I've had teachers like that who when you're doing Euclid, it has to be word for word. So when Socrates gives something like, Socrates would say the end or the boundary of something is the limit or extremity. Now, someone like Prodicus might disagree and have to like pull us up on our wording, but you know, as it's the same thing. The limit or the extremity is the end or the boundary is the limit or extremity of something. That's our definition. So we're going to use that. If you acknowledge we know it, we should build on that. So something that has been bounded and completed. Right, so even though Prodicus might be a Nazi on the words, it's not necessary because we know that which is bounded has been completed. Okay, nothing complicated. No need to get hung up word for word. It's not complicated here. I mean, when you're doing Euclid, maybe there are some instances where it is important to be particular for the words, but generally speaking, we know what we have defined it. Meno says, yep, I understand what you mean. Believe I do. What next? Do you call a plane and also, that's two-dimensional, and in turn a solid, in three-dimensional object in geometry? Do you call something a plane and another in turn a solid, as you do in geometry? Yes. Now, out of these admissions, you have already understood. You've already admitted you understand it. See, we're building together. You know what I mean by shape. For my explanation will apply to every shape. A plane, a two-dimensional or three-dimensional one. For that by which a solid is bounded is shape. So we're working through the division stage. Division. Now, if you're familiar with Euclid, there's like a, I can't remember the terms. There's a definition, there's a enunciation, and then there's the, all right, so in Euclid, there are 6 parts. So considering we're looking for the paradigm of understanding the dialectic as having 4, we were wondering how can we fit these 4 or the 6 parts of Euclid into the 4? Actually, I could even throw it up on the board. We have, just throw it up here. There we go. Enunciation. So we start. This is what's to be proved. Now, on a given, okay, let's use the first definition, the first proposition, the first thing you make in Euclid. On a given straight line to construct the equilateral triangle. This is what we're after. Setting out. Let A be the given finite straight line. So here we have our definition. The enunciation is kind of like the preconditions, what we're aiming to do. What we set out is the second stage. So let's define the straight line that we want to construct an equilateral triangle on. Let's call it AB. Specification. Announcing what has to be construction or proved in this specific instance. So these first three are kind of particular. It's kind of like, not pedantic, but it's interesting how they say, this is what we hope to do. On a given finite straight line, construct an equilateral triangle. Now we have to maybe that's the definition. The demonstration is the next two, maybe. Let's call that line. Let's make a specific demonstration of that on this particular line. Let's call it AB. Specification. Thus, what we're really doing is constructing an equilateral triangle on this particular straight line. Is that a demonstration? Maybe. I think so. Maybe those two together. Construction. So that's where you actually have to follow the steps. That's the division stage. That's what Socrates is doing. Saying, hey, in the text we're reading, I think that's where he's building his argument. So here for Euclid, adding points, lines, and circles is needed. For construction of problems, this is where the main construction is described. For theorems, this part is present. If present, describes auxiliary objects that need to be added to a figure to complete the proof. If there are none, it can be omitted. Right, so if there's nothing that has to be built and it's self-evident, you don't need to do it. But if you have to actually build the triangle, this is where you use the things you've agreed on. We've already agreed on what a limit is. So now we have to use it to do the thing we want to do. What are we doing with Meno? We want to define shape. So what would be the setting out and specification or the demonstration? A single plane or a three-dimensional solid object. It should equally apply to both. That's what Socrates says. Okay, this is the specific. What's the enunciation or definition? Define what a shape is. What's the setting out and specification? A plane or a solid object. What's the construction? Okay, well, we'll use a definition of what a limit is, the extremity of something, or the boundary that when it's been finished, and therefore and we'll bring it together. So given we've defined an extremity or a limit, we will end with you've already understood what a plane or a solid is. We will say that for every shape, that which binds a solid, that by which a solid is bound is a shape. So the boundaries, what's that? The limits. The limits or the boundaries of something, that's a shape. Sorry, the boundary of a solid, that makes a shape. Last part. Putting it together. So these part, our proof and conclusion would be synthesis and analysis. Therefore, bringing it all together, Socrates says, though putting it all together, I would say shape is the very limit of a solid. And conclusion is restating what had been proved. Therefore, we have proven what we aimed to do in our definition. So that's bringing it back to the definition. Therefore, what we defined, or the enunciation, was to define a shape. Therefore, the conclusion, we have defined it. QED is what you say. It's a Latin term. Therefore, it has been proven. That's what it means. So Socrates is just walking him through the stages of how Euclid reasons. Only he's using the model that even Euclid used. Isn't that cool? I think so. All right, let's run through it again. Okay. Do you call something the end a termination and boundary? All right, so what's the definition? Well, we've already said it, it's implied here. To define a shape. Do you already know what a limit or an extremity is? That which is the end of something or its boundary? Something that's not complicated, is it? No, I'm with you. Do you know what a plane is? So just using two pieces that you've already admitted you know. And what a solid is. Yes, I know what that is. Great. So we don't have to build it from scratch like we do with Euclid. You already know these two ideas. So just out of these two admissions, you've already said you understand. So now we're constructing. We can bring these divisions back in together. So these would be our divisions. The different ideas. We can take these and bring them together and say what I mean by shape. Every shape is this. That by which a solid is bound. Hooray. We've already described boundary. That was the extremity or limit of something. Of what? A plane or a solid. Therefore, that which is solid is bound is shape. So putting it together, I would say shape is just the limit of a solid, or the boundary of a solid. So, very simple. We kind of had to do some work to unpack it. Having a familiarity with Euclid helped Meno and helped us. Some of it was implied, but we can see he's not following a structure pedantically, as Protagus might be if he's that kind of a person. But we don't have to do it. We're not like when we talk with our friends, we do it in a friendly and gentle way. We don't have to go step by step. We're not doing it for an exam. Meno, then what about color? Okay, you are overbearing, O Meno. Give me a break. I just did a really awesome thing. Where's my flowers? For you task an old man with demands for answers, since you are unwilling to recall to say what in the world self is that virtue claims to be, that Gorgias claims virtue to be. So what's he doing? Demanding answers. Is that part of virtue? Why is Socrates pointing it to it? You are unwilling to recall or to say what in the world that self. Now notice, self. What's the self of virtue? That Gorgias claims it to be. Not only is he pointing out that he doesn't know, he's pointing out that his teacher might not be someone worth following. After you have answered me this, then I will tell you. So, Meno's being sneaky.
Sneaky little hobbitses.
Or petulant. By the way you carry on a conversation, Meno, even one who is blindfolded would recognize you are handsome and have lovers. So Socrates just went through all this and he's like, okay, now give me, and you've given me how to, okay, maybe it's because he can remember it and come and sound like a smarty pants. Okay, you've already given me shape, now give me color. It's like, whoa, hang on a second. If this is the way you talk to people, even someone who is blindfolded would be able to tell that you're a handsome person and you've got many lovers. You got a lot of side pieces, we would say. What?
What?
Says Meno. Because you do nothing except assign tasks in these statements, which is what spoiled people do. So, spoiled. Notice the charm that Socrates has. He's doing it in a funny way. Hey, you must be a real alpha, we might say. Or high value male, as is the meme in our culture right now that fascists and grifters you'd like to use to say. That's what Elon Musk recently said. The only people who should get to vote, not people who have wisdom, not people who have knowledge, not people who know the excellence of the soul like we're reading, but high value males. People who are good looking and have big muscles and have many women's. The alphas or the sigmas. This kind of, we call it brain rot. The ridiculous culture that's emerging at this current time of recording, 2024. We call it brain rot. There's nothing that Elon Musk can point to that can justify him having everything and everyone else struggling or starving or being massacred in genocides and wars. Nothing. Except I'm handsome and I get to have lots of wives because I'm rich. Right? And this is what Meno is like. And he say even someone who's blindfolded can recognize you're that kind of idiot. Why? Because you're a spoiled brat. And that makes you tyrannical, right? Isn't that what these sigmas want to do? These racists and fascists and sexists, they promote this conservative right-wing ideology, not only because it makes them rich, but because they get to play a, what do we call it in capitalism? A petty tyrant. You own a business, so you get to push around others. So that's why a lot of really poor people are bootlickers for Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They want them to be fascists, even though they are the ones who are going to be exploited and pushed around. They like the idea that maybe one day they will be on top, and they like the idea of being a tyrant themselves. That's the appeal. We say these people who are conned by these fascist grifters and billionaires, they don't see themselves as the ones being exploited. They view themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Or billionaires now. Temporarily embarrassed billionaires. Well, actually, I'm one like you. I just haven't got my money sorted. One day I'll be a billionaire like Elon, and I want to push people around and be a sexist as well. You know, they're appealing to that part of our soul that we call the pathologos, that we seek to uncover and address in our midwifery channel. Important to realize, important to put a name on. That's what they're appealing to. And all the other hierarchies and things is the pathologos. We seek to actually climb the hierarchical development of our own state of being in philosophy, but it has its shadow. If we climbing the ladder is the, do we have an image? Surely we have an image. If climbing the ladder is the logos, then the shadow of the logos is the pathologos. Got a ladder? Here's a ladder. As a shadow. Let's draw it. We've talked about this before. If we are seeking to climb the, where's my pen? There we go. If we're seeking to climb the ladder of the logos, of our understanding, and our states of mind, and if there is a hierarchical development that we climb, that's what we're doing here. What we just read in the text, the way of the dialectician. Then it casts a shadow. There's equally a shadow past by this ladder that's on the ground, does not go up, but stays stuck on the ground, and we call that the pathologos. And the pathologos leads to your fate and failure. Fate and failure. Whereas the logos reaches your destiny. We might say the good, because we were talking about reaching the good as the goal of virtue. Destiny. So we might as well throw in that idea, considering we just read it in the text. The good. So this harkens back to a meme debate that was in popular culture recently. Why would women rather run into a bear in the woods when they're alone by themselves, alone in the woods, than a man? Because a bear does not have this. Doesn't have a logos development and its pathologos shadow. It's in the state of acting without logos. The back and forth of animal urges. It's either hungry or it's not. If it's not hungry, it's not going to eat you. If it is hungry, he might chase you for a while until he gets tired or whatever, or you escape it. Now, a lot the animals may be developing to reaching logos soon, but not yet. But the logos has its pathologos, so just as we seek the true good, human beings, men, can be stuck in this. Their worst problems, their greatest, we call this vice. And this is virtue. Well, yeah, we're after what virtue is, but we could call this vice. In that people can do terrible, terrible things and feel justified in doing it because it's their petty tyranny or their fascism or their image of what's good that's actually what's really unjust. So, and easy to see right after most women said, I'd rather run into a bear in the woods than a man. Many of the men who are very attached to their problem, everyone is somewhere in between here and here. Hopefully we're more up here if we're doing the work in a midwifery on removing this, and we're doing the work on this channel and reading the Meno of climbing this ladder. Everyone is somewhere in this arc. Speaking of triangles, and this is a right angle triangle here, so we're somewhere in this arc. But the people down here would go, screw you women, if I ever catch you in the forest, I would, and they would go on a rant, unspeakable things, which is the very reason, proving the very thing that they were saying. Okay, so that's vice. Now, in capitalism, we call them petty tyrants. You own a business, you are a landlord, you have some little bit of power over another. What do people do? They get very excited about the opportunity to cosplay as a fascist or a petty tyrant. So the bootlickers for the billionaires and the fascists, even though they're the ones being abused, they consider themselves as temporarily embarrassed billionaires themselves. So they are appealed. They're drawn to this. That's why we do midwifery. Figure out why we are drawn to our problems and our vice that harms our souls and our incarnations and prevents us from reaching our good and our destiny and developing, mastering the way of the dialectic. That's why we have the series on midwifery. Check it out. It's on YouTube. So, one such person who is born into maybe a family of wealth and good standing and so on, is someone who is handsome and has lots of alphas. What Elon Musk called a high-value male. And Elon Musk went on to say, these are the only people who should vote. People like me. Everyone else shouldn't get a chance to vote. What's that called? Tyranny. And being a spoiled jerk. That very much personified by those Trump, Elon Musk sorts of people. But notice how Socrates doesn't say it as callously, as straightforwardly as I just did. I don't expect Trump or Elon Musk to ever watch this video. But if we were, maybe we would do it more in the charming way that Socrates does. Hey, you must be really handsome and have a lot of side pieces there, Meno. And even a blindfolded person could recognize that. That sounds like a compliment, right? Why? Because you're doing nothing except assigning tasks in these statements, which is what spoiled people do, in as much as they're tyrannical, so long as they are in the flower of their bloom. When they're in their good-looking stage of life. At the same time, you have probably recognized in me that I am at a disadvantage with those who are beautiful. How charming is Socrates here? You are so beautiful, especially when you are in the flower of your bloom. By the way, these looks aren't going to last, pal, is maybe the subtext. But me, I'm at a disadvantage around someone so beautiful as you. Sounds like a pickup line. But really he's saying, you can replace beautiful with tyrannical or spoiled. Therefore, I will do you a favor and I will answer. Second favor. Notice, Meno, then you must certainly do me that favor. He's taken it well. You can say, hey, look, you are a spoiled brat. You're a tyrant. You don't know anything you're talking about. And your teacher is a joke. We've already said that already. And everything that your family and those lovers that you have that have been supporting you, they're all idiots too. Now, that he might take that kind of negatively, wouldn't he? To hear that all your loved ones and everything that you hold dear about how great you are is nonsense. But if he does it in this artful way, I don't know, maybe there's some benefit in this. Maybe when Meno is ready to see, he will have heard it and it will come up. Because Socrates says, oh, no, you're just so beautiful and you have many lovers. It's because you're a spoiled brat who acts like a tyrant. But the only people who can get away with that are people who are in the flower of their bloom. So therefore, I'm at a disadvantage with petty spoiled brats like you. I mean, beautiful people like you. You're so beautiful. And Meno's like, oh, really? Oh, okay. So, interesting way of being, what do you call it? Gentle. Being gentle with your friends in the way of the dialectician. Can you teach that? If that's a virtuous way of telling the truth in a way that your friend can hear, whereas if you just say, hey, you're a tyrant, you're a beta. We would call them today, you're just a beta cuck. You're not a high value male like me, who's handsome in the flower of my bloom and has lots of women's or lovers. So I can dismiss your opinion. You're just a lefty extremist, or that sort of bullcrap way of dismissing the truth. That allows them to keep their ignorance. Now, Socrates isn't doing that. He's presenting it in a way that is able to be heard and not immediately rejected. Now, if is that virtue? This question keeps coming up because we don't know what virtue is. Socrates says, I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to go on an adventure, on a quest to seek it with you. So all the way through, we've been asking, is that virtue? Is that virtue? Is that virtue? Is what we just saw virtue? Is it more virtuous to tell the truth in a way that's not going to be immediately rejected and might be easier for someone to hear? Hey, maybe in some way, if Meno grew up in this family with this teacher and everything, he's only now just meeting a Socrates, then maybe it's not his fault that he would take it rather personally. And maybe even his teacher has taught him techniques to dismiss truth. Like, hey, every religion and cult and in-group political party has a way of teaching the followers, those who are being exploited by the group, teaching them to dismiss truth. If anyone challenges your faith, that's because the devil has them. That's because they're a heathen. That's because they're an infidel. That's because they're a moyim, or whatever the Jewish word for non-believer is. That's because they're a leftist. That's because they're an extremist. You don't have to listen to them. Everyone has a way of villainizing anyone who disagrees with you, ad hominem we call it, so that you reject, so you close off from being open-minded and listening to reason. It's cult behavior 101. Families are the same thing. That's why, religion is passed down through the family. Racism is usually passed down through the family. Sexism, small-minded thinking, that kind of thing. So what are we doing? We are looking to understand the root causes of certain sicknesses or problems in mind, in our soul, in our psyche, in our consciousness. Because if there's any benefit or art in what we're doing here, it would be to address those illnesses. If there's an art of medicine to do with the body, using the metaphor, that's the lesser. What would be the anagogic movement to the greater? What would be the medicine of the soul, of the psyche, of consciousness, of mind? Something to do with the logos. So what are we doing? We are understanding how come women would rather meet a bear in the woods than a man. How come people are bootlickers for fascists? How come people like Trump, who are quite obviously not Catholic or Christian, are followed by the Christian evangelists in America? That shouldn't make sense. He's not consistent with anything that they supposedly believe. But we're understanding why. If you came into a doctor's office with a sickness and he started berating you for being sick, you'd be like, whoa, his bedside manner has some improvements to be done. Maybe if he was like House from that show, then maybe you get away with it. But even House gets away with berating his patients sometimes because he has charm. So you don't vilify people for having a human nature, having the human pathologos that we are here to develop. That's where we are in our evolutionary stage as human beings. We have pathologos from our early evolutionary history that we have to address, giving us a potential to master midwifery, which is the dialectic on our problems. So we're not vilifying people for being there, we're understanding it. And therefore, part of the way of the dialectician maybe is to use the charm that Socrates is doing to tell the truth in a way that can be heard. And understanding why it might be difficult for someone like Meno to hear it. Maybe.
But hey, that's just a theory.
It's just a theory. And all of that, we can ask the question, is that virtue? Is all of what we said virtue? Or a part of virtue? Is it a virtue? Is it a virtuous act? Is it an aspect of virtue itself? All right, so I'll do you a favor because you're so beautiful. Not because of the spoiled brat tyrant stuff. Meno says, then you must certainly do me that favor. Really leaning into that role. Therefore, do you wish that I answer you in the Gorgian mode? What the heck is the Gorgian mode? Maybe his teacher, Gorgias. Gorgias. So not only does he know his teacher, he knows his mode. Interesting. Which you would easily follow. I do so wish. How could I not? How could I not want you to answer in the way that I was taught? Do both of you say, as Empedocles, Now, I think I might have been muted for a second, so let's review that. There are flows of real beings, so at least he knows that there is something called being. There are passages in which these flows pass through. Some of the streams harmonically fit into the passages. So there are streams of real being and there are passages. Some fit into the passages, some are too small to be. Okay? No idea what that means. Something to do with how being relates to passages, I guess, in reality. Not sure. Keep wondering about it. Now, movement from the greater to the lesser. Vision. Because being is beyond vision, of course. Do you think there's such a thing called vision? Yes, of course I do. Surely then, from these statements, conceive or connect that which I mean to say, as Pindar says. Okay, he's quoting Pindar. I don't know who Pindar is. Pindar is one of the greatest lyric poets of ancient Greece, and the master of Epinsia, choral odes celebrating victories achieved in the Pythian, Olympic, Isthmian, and Nemean games. Okay, around 500 BC. A poet. I think he's mentioned in other places in the Republic too. All right, so conceive, connect what I mean to say, says Pindar. For color is the flow. Oh, here we go. Color is the flow from shapes that is symmetrical and perceptible to sight. Wow. Holy crap. So Socrates claiming not to know what virtue is. He knows a lot about the beings of shape and color. Color. Oh, no, wait. He's already said shape. He's defined shaped physically, but before that he said shape is one of the beings that follows color. And then he went on to say Um, yeah, then Meno says, well, what if you don't know what color is? Okay, well, let's define shape in a different way, physically. So now he's given a physical explanation. Before it was a being explanation. Shape is the boundary of any solid. Before it was one of the beings that follows color. Now he's using a different way of outlining his point. And he says, by the way, color is the flow from shapes that is symmetrical and perceptible to sight. So he's drawing on a way of thinking that is already known to Meno from his teacher. So Gorgias, the Gorgian mode, must already teach that the beings exist and that they follow streams, and those streams somehow travel down from the realm of being to our physical world. And color is the flow from shapes. What are shapes? Shapes are existing beings that follow color. So color flows from the shapes in being that is symmetrical and perceptible to sight. Now that's interesting. So we're also learning something more about metaphysics. The question, how does the realm of being create our physical world? Or if everything in our physical world somehow comes from the realm of being or flows from being, how does it relate to us and our perceptions, our physical perceptions? Well, there's something symmetrical. Color is symmetrical to sight. What does that mean? Color flows from shapes in being in a stream that is somehow symmetrical to our perception of sight. What does that mean? There's another big so opens up another question. That's good. We want to carry questions. Here's a question from that. What role does symmetry play in our ability to perceive higher dimensions? Well, in our reading, we are trying to be like Socrates. We aren't Socrates, so are we being symmetrical? If we approach this text the same way Socrates does, with an open mind, genuinely curious to know, not like Meno who thinks he knows. What else did he say? In a friendly way, in a gentle way, trying to master the way of the dialectic. Are we therefore being symmetrical to Socrates? Does that therefore open us up to perceive the level of being that Socrates is on? So if Socrates knows the realm of being, and from what we've read in other texts, maybe he's gone beyond the realm of being, so has a greater level of enlightenment, we might say, or interdimensional state of existence. We want that. We want to not be deluded in the cave of the shadows, as we say, in using the analogy from the Republic. A physical world is like a cave of shadows. We want to enter the real world. Are we being symmetrical, being like him as much as we can? Now, we aren't enlightened. Well, if you're one of the ones watching who is, good for you. But most of us aren't. So, how does symmetry allow us to perceive that which is greater? Well, likeness. Hang on a second. We're back on the word of the day. Anagogic movement. Let's put it over here. We've talked about anagogic movement. Let's write this down. Anagogic. Anagogic movement. What's that? Moving from the lesser to the greater or higher through analogy. And this happens through analogy. Through analogy. So for example, a shepherd, let's use our famous example, a shepherd relates to his sheep. Oh no, let's use what we've been doing today. So we're looking at how society relates to fascism. Fascism. Did I spell fascism? Relates to progressiveness. As our soul relates to the pathologos and the logos, or the way of the let's say from the text today, the way of the dialectician. Oh goodness, handwriting. Dialectician. There we go. So that's our movement. So today we've been looking at how to understand. So you can use the lesser to the great, like using our understanding of this over here. I'm gonna make some room. So we're talking about the man versus bear debate, and the prevalence of grifters, and what was the text? What did the text say? Contentious people, and what was the word? If you were a antagonist, contentious and antagonist person. So why are they so prevalent? So we looked at that today. So that was, we started by looking at our model. If there is a ladder that we are learning to climb in this channel, and by reading Socrates, that's the ladder of the logos towards destiny. Using our understanding and our state of mind. So this is what we're talking about with enlightenment, or Socrates on a higher dimension. That's our state of mind. Understanding being our method or yoga to get there, the way of the dialectician. This is the logos ladder. It casts a shadow of our problems that keep us trapped in our pathologos or sick logos, keeping us stuck in failure or fate. We use that understanding to move down to talk about man versus bear debate. So it's moving down. But then when we're talking about society, how it relates to fascism and right-wing grifters and stuff, and how, well, I guess the alternative would be progressive. Now, I don't mean the people who call themselves progressive that are actually right-wingers themselves, maybe slightly more progressive than outright mask-off fascists as we see today, who are openly trying to destroy the planet and just give everything to the billionaires and screw everyone. They're mask-off now. They're outright fascists. The left claim to be progressive. They're not doing a lot different. They're keeping the status quo alive. They're not mask-off. Now, true progressivism would be the logos, employing the logos to understand the question of the text. What is excellence of the soul? And how can we use that understanding of excellence of the soul to meet humans' needs in harmony with, symmetrically, with the resources of the planet and the technology to distribute the resources of the planet to meet all physical needs in a efficient, renewable, sustainable way, so that we would have to be free from any physical work. We don't really need that to do that anymore, so we can be free to do our job, master the way of the dialectician. That would be true progressivism, not what it is today. Slightly fascism light, we might say, maintaining the status quo of a inherently disgustingly corrupt system of war because it profits, slavery because it profits, wealth inequality because it profits. All of the things that are allowed to happen today is because it makes a small amount of people a lot of profit. Yum, 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 dollars for them at the expense of the planet and the people. That's called capitalism. So why is nobody doing anything about capitalism? Because the system is corrupt. Maintains the system that brings into power the people who rule over the system. People like Meno. So we use that to understand the soul. Hey, yeah, it's easy to point fingers at society, especially our society now that's quite obviously disgustingly corrupt in late stage capitalism. But so what? We want to feel good about ourselves like Meno, or because we're so smart, or make that anagogic movement, see it as an analogy. So this would be the lesser. Can we see it as an analogy? If reality follows the logos and the dialectic, then it has to be an unfolding to all levels. Therefore, the greater, can we use this understanding of the lesser, the physical, to gain an insight into the greater? That's anagogic movement. What would that be? Our soul is to, not fascism, but the pathologos. We have a part of ourselves that seeks fascism, that can be conned by people who, are selling this kind of fascism that we are familiar with, that we grew up with, that's familiar to our family, society, religion, and culture. But there's also a part of us that seeks to evolve, seeks to have empathy for people, seeks to change things, not to be conserving the past, but progressing into a future and a better way of being. That's the part of our soul that seeks the logos. So we have these two aspects. That's why half of the channel is based on what we're doing now, reading about the logos. Half of it is the midwifery. Well, I don't know if half, but we also read the midwifery book, which is to do with this. So that's anagogic movement. So why are we talking about that now? Well, there is something about the realm of being. Let's put it in yellow because it's bright and shiny. Realm of being that somehow creates the world of becoming that we start in as humans, in our physical senses. So our question is, how do we perceive it? How do we perceive? Question, how do we perceive? Well, the word was symmetry. So what's symmetry? Symmetry is to be like, which is likeness, which is another way of saying same and different. You're not exactly the same. So if you look in the mirror, you see a symmetrical reflection of yourself. There is a lot that's the same. It looks like you, but the left is right and the right is left. There are some differences. What's that? That is metaphor. That is the principle behind metaphor. And if we want to be symmetric, and if we are wanting to apply this ourselves, metaphor and anagogic. So these are some possible theories about how we can perceive that which is higher. We are like Socrates. So Socrates would be the greater. He's relating to Meno. Let's use it down here. So Socrates relates to Meno as we are relating to the text. So if we approach the text with the same, not same, a similar integrity, we are becoming symmetrical. We become like or symmetrical to Socrates.
I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat a monkey like Joe Rogan. I want to become like Socrates, making me symmetrical to Socrates. And from what Socrates is saying, that might be a way we in our physical world can perceive the realm of being. Just as analogy, we are able to perceive shape because through the channel of color that's symmetrical to our perception of sight. So just as, so we can say also this is like color. So we can say under this, so we are to Socrates, say a little bit. So we are to, we are to Socrates as vision is to color. What are we doing? We're taking the lesser and using it to understand the greater. How can we become more like being, or more like Socrates, more like someone who's mastered the way of the dialectic? And what's this relationship about? Symmetry. That's the relationship. Vision is, color is symmetrical to vision, allowing to vision to participate or to view the realm of being. So if we become symmetrical to Socrates, maybe we can do the same. But hey, that's just a theory.
That's just a theory.
That's important. We have to collect theories as we go, and questions, and be curious about them. Whoop. So, dropping little tidbits for us. Color is the flow from shapes that is symmetrical and perceptible to sight. Wow. Meno says that, O Socrates, appears to me, appearance. Now, appearing to me, is that different from true? Is he more concerned? Is it my truth? It appears to me. It's my opinion. Are we interested in opinion or appearance? No. Meno appears to me to be the best answer you've stated. Sock. Probably because it's spoken in a style that you are accustomed. And at the same time, I think you realize that from self, you will be able to state what both sound and smell are, as well as the other senses. Can we do it? What would that be? Sound and smell. Well, if color is the flow from shapes that's symmetrical and perceptible to sight, sound would be the flow from what? That is symmetrical and perceptible to hearing. So sound is some flow from some being in the realm of being that we're able to perceive. What is it? We've got color and shape. What would sound be a reflection of? I don't know. Smell is even harder. Anyway, relating to people in a style that they're accustomed. Is that part of virtue? Is that part of the way of the dialectician? I don't know. Take that question with us. Meno says entirely so. For the answer is theatrically tragic, O Meno, so that it pleases you more than the one about shape. What? All right, so this is a definition of color, not the one about shape. Shape is, well, we defined it physically, the boundary of a solid or plane. But also it is, shape is the only truly existing being that happens to follow color. So he would rather, so something tragic about, something theatrically tragic about Meno being pleased by this definition of color more than the one about shape. It does indeed. Does what? Oh, it does please him more. So he agrees that he's more pleased by this one. But is it not, O son of Aleximedes, as I persuade myself? But it is not as I persuade myself. But the former one is better. Though it's not better. The other one is. But I think that it would appear so to you, just as you were saying yesterday, if it were not necessary for you to leave before the mysteries, but you remained until you were initiated.
Wow. Wow.
What is he talking about here? So, why did Meno like this description better than the one about being? Socrates is saying, you left before the mysteries. What the heck are the mysteries? Well, if you remained, you would be initiated. There is a kind of spiritual initiation as part of learning in those days. What does that mean? Well, if you were following along with our reading of the Phaedo, Socrates goes into depth about what true spiritual initiation is. To give a general shape of it, the mysteries and its initiation are about perceiving the realm of being. That's what initiation means. Spiritually initiated, what's the realm of the spirit? Or rather, just as you can use sight to see color and hearing to hear sound, you need to have this initiation, or it's called the third eye, or the eye of the soul, or ousia. That's the object of sense that can perceive the realm of being. Socrates goes into this in more depth in Book 6 of the Republic. Different objects for different faculties that we have. We have a faculty that can understand. We have a faculty that can see and hear. We have a faculty called nous that can perceive the realm of being. And everything we're talking about, the one that applies to the many, the and not the a's, the noun, not the adjectives, that exists in being. Physically, we see the adjectives: a beautiful thing, a colorful thing, a thing that has a shape. But what is shape itself? If somebody said, what is shape itself? And they pointed to some specific shapes. Oh, there's a circle, there's a square. You go, hang on a second. Those are examples. That say no doy. All we know are examples. That's all we see with our physical senses. You go, yes, that's true. Hang on a second. That's true. But there must be something we recognize in some way, even though we haven't seen it with our physical senses, for us to recognize that circle is actually the same kind of thing as that square, even though they look very different. Not very different. They look different. One is round, one is pointy. What's that thing that we give the name shape? Same thing with color. Red is different than white. But what is it that we recognize or see called color? You can't say color is white. White is a color. So in other words, you can't point to adjectives that we see in our physical world to talk about the thing itself. Well, where is this other realm, this other world that's the cause of these adjectives? Where's the noun living? That's the whole reason for initiation. In the Phaedo, he talks about the what philosophy is really the art and practice of death and dying. How do you separate your soul or your mind or your consciousness, your psyche, out of your physical body, away from the physical senses and all the distractions and pretty shapes and colors that distract more simple-minded people, so that you can collect yourself together out of the soul, which makes it easier to do philosophy, by the way, if you're in the game of mastering this way of the dialectician. Less distraction. You don't have to take a pause to go to the bathroom as much or get hungry. In another text, Socrates says that's why the Egyptians wrapped themselves up in bandages and stuff to preserve the body so they can leave for longer without having to worry about coming back and maintaining it as frequently. But that separating from the body is death, and he said, therefore, philosophers seek death the most. Now, people will laugh at philosophers because they think philosophers are useless. How are you getting physical things? How are you becoming a billionaire like Elon Musk or a high-value male and like Meno? These physical things. What are you doing? Wanting to understand the cause of everything, the nature of the good, the reason for existence, our destiny, the realm of pure being? Waste of time. So yeah, you do deserve to die. Ha 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 ha, says the many. Socrates says, yeah, they're right. They don't know why they're right. They're right for the wrong reasons. Philosophers seek to have that experience. This is what he's talking about in initiation. So it's theatrically tragic that physical descriptions are more appealing to you because you left school before you were able to participate in those mysteries and you are uninitiated. You haven't yet left the physical senses, engaged that sixth sense, ousia, that can, maybe through symmetry, perceive ousia itself. Ousia is the Greek word that's the nature of being. By the way, if we are doing a reflection on ourselves at all times, if we are reflecting on ourselves, hey, Socrates to Meno, how do we reflect on ourselves? How can we be better? We, here. What else? The soul. We're talking about society, but we reflect on our soul. This self-reflection. Hey, by the way, the dialectic. The dialectic has 4 stages: definition, demonstration, division, conclusion. The conclusion comes back to the start. So this dialectic and this self-reflection is as close to or symmetrical to ousia, because it's the ousia you do through understanding. We're not here talking about, I don't know, how we can become famous, how we can become an alpha, how we can become a high-value man. We're making fun of those silly things because they're distractions from this, which is a way of the dialectician using understanding through the dialectic to reflect on ourself. So we can put self up here. Reflect on ourself, learning the logos, bringing up our states of mind. In doing so, we're climbing that ladder. We are becoming ousia. Well, we're doing ousia, self-reflection with the logos on what is most insignificant. What's ousia? The ability to turn around and know yourself. That's what gives the essence to being, because being isn't physical. So what makes it a lot? What makes it a thing? What makes there be a being that is shape, a being that is color? Well, we've already talked about color. A being that is beauty, a being that is justice. Hey, one of the beings we talked about, virtue. how does it have its existence in the realm of being if it's not physical and can't take a physical shape in time? Ousia. The nature of being is ousia. Therefore, by reading in this way and reflecting in this way and doing our best to hunt for the dialectic in this way and learn what it means to have the way of the dialectician in this way, we are being as much like circle, as much like the realm of being as we can in the realm of becoming. So we are being as symmetrical to the realm of being as we can while we're here. What's that? That's the preparation for, or the method of, initiation. So this dialectic that we're doing, that Socrates is reasonably so unfamiliar with, that Socrates is helping him learn, would be part of the mysteries in philosophy leading to our initiation through likeness of ousia into the realm of being. Therefore, when Socrates says, hey, it's theatrically tragic, just because I'm using a style that you're accustomed to and you can use to, imitate for sound and smell and the other senses, you like that better than me actually giving you a definition that relates to the realm of being, truly existing being. You'd rather hear about color that is symmetrical to our senses than what it streams out from the actual truly existing beings, that is shape. Everything in our physical world has a shape. Where does it come from? So that's interesting. So not only is he familiar with his teacher and familiar with his way of reasoning, but he's also able to judge that Meno hasn't had this experience of being yet. A kind of enlightenment. There are many different levels of enlightenment and different depths of perceiving being, of course, and different levels of mastery. That's what we do in philosophy. How do we not only experience it, but understand it? How do we use it for our art of the dialectic? And so on and so on. So maybe enlightenment is too broad a word, but he's not been initiated. Is that virtue? The ability to judge whether or not someone has, like Meno, has experienced it yet. And therefore tailor your speech, tailor your use of the dialectic to match him where he's at. Even though it's tragic that he prefers the lesser over the greater. He's not going anagogic. Is that virtue? How important it is to judge whether or not, or where someone's at. Is that part of the art? Mentioned in the Phaedo, by the way. For those who want to follow along in that series on YouTube too. Right, let's keep going. I will remain, O Socrates, if you give me many such answers. Well, hang on a second. He's saying, hang on, you need to stop being a petty tyrant and spoiled brat, even if you're good looking or whatever. You stop using your pretty privilege, and get yourself initiated. And he's like, no, I just want answers. What? Give me lots of answers. Socrates says, and that's interesting given what we talked about as everything we're doing, approaching the text with this level of integrity, looking for questions, creating theories.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Creating hypotheses, looking for the dialectic. We don't know what we're doing. Like, we're not experts here. We're just curious and playing the game, trying to be as open and curious as Socrates says in the beginning. Where is my little... Here we go. Socrates says right at the beginning. I don't happen to know. I stand in need of knowing this, whether excellence is teachable or not. And I don't even happen to know what in the world self-excellence is. So this curiosity, this wonder, this looking for questions, this being open, being the opposite of Meno. He goes on to say, I've never met anyone who does, by the way. So this kind of way of being, we are trying to match ourselves to the text. So what? Well, if that little reflection that we just did, that might be the method of initiation, being puzzled in that kind of a way and seeking in that kind of a way and trying to be a Sherlock Holmes in that kind of a way. If that is being most symmetrical to or like Usia, which might be the method for the initiation, and then Meno says, "Hey, I want answers from you instead," that seems to be the exact opposite. So it's not only theatrically tragic, but theatrically comic. So I'll hang around if you give me lots of answers, Socrates. Socrates says, I will most certainly not be lacking in eagerness to give you such answers, both for your sake and my own. Oh. How is Socrates going to benefit from giving answers? That's another question we've got. Both for your sake and my own. But I may not be able to give you many such answers in this way. So maybe the coming up with answers is in a different kind of a way that would actually benefit him too. Maybe in this way, preparing himself or for opening himself for the experience, maybe, or at least to make sense of what he's already experienced. Is that the different kind of a way? What way is Socrates going to proceed with his questions that would equally benefit him? Specifically relating to mysteries and initiation. Maybe to do with symmetry of being, as he mentioned just before. Allowing us to perceive that which we're symmetrical to from the realm of being. That is a fantastic question. On that cliffhanger, let's end the podcast for today. What's going to be his way of going forward in that way, and how do we've got a big sack full of questions to carry with us. How is he going to answer in a way that can maybe help him in that significant way? Hey, and if he's going to benefit Meno, maybe it'll help Meno in that way. Is he going to use a different way of answering his questions that isn't just feeding him answers in that way that Gorgias maybe did to him, his past teacher? Exciting.
Wow.
So with that cliffhanger, I hope to see you next time. Like, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch, join the Discord, support on Patreon, donate if there's a donate ability somewhere on the channel if you want to donate to the channel. Have questions, be curious. If you are curious, I hope you are curious. I hope something from this has jumped out and made you wonder. And thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.
I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to eat a monkey. I don't want to eat a monkey.